Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good evening. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, and Wednesday night, September 1st. I'm happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is Up to Us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And the chat room is open if anybody would like to sit in there and hang out. And, I want to continue talking about neglect from a PDF that I found on the Child Welfare Information Gateway. We've been looking at this for pretty much a couple of weeks. It's a huge PDF document, 112 pages long or something, and we're not going to cover the whole thing. Some of it's very clinical, but I just want to take a look at what neglect is and what constitutes neglect and what are the signs and symptoms of neglect, and also taking a look at some of the behavioral and emotional and psychological consequences that arise from neglect, and that's the portion that I wanted to look at tonight. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate everyone who's listening to the shows and being here for me on a regular basis. I know it's a lot of people are tuning into my shows, I'm sure of it. And I thank you so much for being here and listening to me day after day after day, just talking about, the whole issues surrounding child abuse and survivors and issues and just the whole thing. So thank you so much. I have over 10,000 shows listened to now. I just checked the count, and it's like 10,030 shows listened to, and I really appreciate that. And I had no idea when I started out how long I'd even be doing this, or how many people would actually be tuning in. So I thank you so much for being here with me and, sharing my stuff with people and passing the word. And thank you very much for your support. I really appreciate it. So we'll get right on with this article. And I'm not a professional counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in that area. I'm just really a private citizen who pays to do my own blog talk shows. I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dream Catchers for Abused Children. And it is my goal to stand up and advocate and fight for child rights, to stand up against child abuse, to promote education and awareness, and to stop and prevent child abuse. Right. So my main goal is in public speaking and getting the word out. Abuse abuse and neglect is always just pushed under the carpet. No one wants to talk about it. It's such a horrible thing, a horrible plague and epidemic on our society. Has been since time began, and it's always been pushed away. Nobody wants to deal with it, and that's why it's still continuing. I believe that is exactly why it's still continuing. And we're living in a broken society. All you have to do is take a look around. There's so many people out there who are hurting in so many ways, and whether it's family relationships, families torn apart, divorce, and all kinds of problems, abuse and whatnot within the families, and 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys. That's the stats. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be abused sexually under the age of 18, whether it's unwanted sexual touching or molestation or rape, and that's pretty much the stats for physical, verbal, psychological, emotional abuse as well, and neglect. Neglect is actually the most common of them all, and that's why I wanted to take a look at this, because quite often, you hear people saying, well, we have to stop child abuse, and it's just easier to say, stop child abuse, right? But really, stop child abuse and neglect, because neglect is the most common of all the types of abuse. It's absolutely horrible how many children are living in neglectful situations. Neglect can kill a child just as well as physical abuse. Neglect is very damaging. It's very hard on children, and that's why I want to take a look at this article, and we'll finish it up, maybe tonight or Friday night. Might continue on and finish it up Friday night. We'll see how far we can get, but I did want to finish it up this week. But I just wanted to take a look at what is neglect and how can we prevent neglect, and what are we going to be looking for signs and symptoms, to keep an eye out for children in our own lives, in our own world, in our own communities, in our own families, to make sure that they're not being neglected, they're not abused. Right? We could stop like 90 to 95% of abuse and neglect if we would all do that, because that's where it's happening. It's all happening in the homes. It's happening, these children are being abused and neglected by their parents and caregivers, family members, close family relatives, friends of the family. It's all happening within the homes. The other 5 to 10%, depending on what stats you look at, is all, it's like a stranger, child sexual predator or daycare. Someone gets a hold of the child. So it's a very small percentage. The rest of it, 90 to 95%, is happening in the homes, in people's homes that live right next door to us. right? So that's why it's so important, and within our own families, right? This means within our own families. So we have to do whatever we can to protect children and to get them the help that they need, right? It's so important. I'm just going to keep talking about this until child abuse stops, and so that means, as long as it takes, right? Because I want to be one more voice with all the other voices out here, who are raising awareness and not hiding behind closed doors anymore the subject and the topic of child abuse and neglect, right? This is absolutely horrible. It needs to stop. It should be front and center, mainstream at all times, because I believe that child abuse is preventable, 100% preventable. So it's just pathetic that we can't do this as a society. It just shows you where people's hearts are. And the whole issue being is that children have rights, and I'm here to back those rights up. That's what I'm doing. And so I'll be doing this for the rest of my life. So I'm very happy to be here tonight. I thank everybody who's tuning in, because I know that the reason you're tuning in is because you care as well, and I appreciate that so much. And I know I'm just glad to be able to stand with you as well, right, in this fight to save children's lives. So if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my show, because all of my shows all have a lot of adult content on them. And I don't know where the players are now, and I just don't know how young the people are that are listening to the shows. So if you're a young person, you might want to have someone who's older listen to the show with you, like an adult or someone you trust, family member, counselor at school, a guidance counselor or teacher, somebody who you trust and who has a good head on their shoulders to see if this show is something that you should be listening to and age appropriate, right? Thank you very much for doing that. And we'll get right into this article here. This is from www.childwelfare.gov/pubs, P-U-B-S, /user manuals /neglect/neglect.pdf. And we're on page 31. And I'll actually give you the information on what this article actually is titled and whatnot. This is called the Child Abuse and Neglect User Manual Series. Is Child Neglect Guide for Prevention, Assessment, and Intervention. And it was put out by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families, Administration on Children, Youth and Families, Children's Bureau, Office on Child Abuse and Neglect. And it was written by and put out by Diane DePanfilis, DePanfilis, in 2006. So it's not all that old. Some of the information out there is like from 1992. So 2006 is not too bad as far as being kind of current. And so it's not all that old. And it's some good information. So we're on about page 31, and I want to take a look at the emotional, psychological, and behavioral consequences of neglect. How it affects children, who grow up, in a situation where they're being neglected, right? And they do talk about that here, so I wanted to continue on with this part, especially to show what happens when children are neglected, right? We did talk a little bit about it on Monday night, the impact of neglect as far as academic performance and whatnot goes, as far as this article, right? I'm just reading right from the page here. Emotional, psychosocial, and behavioral development. Neglect can have a strong impact on and lead to problems in a child's emotional, psychosocial, and behavioral development. As with other effects already mentioned, these may be evident immediately after the maltreatment or not manifest themselves until many months or years later. And so emotional and psychosocial consequences. They say all types of neglect and emotional neglect, in particular, can have serious psychosocial and emotional consequences for children. And some of the short-term emotional impacts of neglect, such as fear, isolation, and an inability to trust, can lead to lifelong emotional and psychological problems, such as low self-esteem. A major component of emotional and psychological or psychosocial development is attachment. It says children who have experienced neglect have been found to demonstrate higher frequencies of insecure, anxious, and avoidant attachments with their primary caregivers than non-maltreated children. And it says, in fact, studies have demonstrated that 70 to 100% of maltreated infants form insecure attachments with their caregivers. Often, emotionally neglected children have learned from their relationships with their, let me just keep scrolling here. Let me just find where I'm at here. Sorry about that. With their primary caregivers, that they will not be able to have their needs met by others. So that's just the thing, when a child is neglected, they they're not getting what they need from their primary caregivers, their parents or whoever is the primary caregiver in the home. They're not getting their needs met, so they just take on that whole behavior that they probably won't get their needs met from anyone. So it says this may cause a child not to try to solicit warmth or help from others. This behavior may in turn cause teachers or peers not to offer help or support, thus reinforcing the negative expectations of the neglected child. And one mitigating factor, however, may be having an emotionally a supportive adult, either within or outside of the family, such as a grandparent or teacher, available during childhood. Another mitigating factor may be having a loving, accepting spouse or close friend later in life. So, children who have been neglected, if they have one person or a couple people in their life, like a grandparent, like they're saying, or a teacher, or even later on in life, like a supportive spouse or whatnot, they can learn. We can change this stuff around, right? And I'm speaking as a survivor. Neglected children who are unable to form secure attachments with their primary caregivers may, and they list off here, become more distrustful of others and may be less willing to learn from adults. They may have difficulty understanding the emotions of others, regulating their own emotions, or forming and maintaining relationships with others. They may have a limited ability to feel remorse or empathy, which may mean that they could hurt others without feeling their actions were wrong. They may demonstrate a lack of confidence or social skills that could hinder them from being successful in school, work, and relationships. Just a whole lack of confidence and social skills, that's totally very damaging for children, this whole lack of social skills, and, because it's necessary, right? We need these social skills. We need this confidence and these social skills in order to go on to have a good life, you know what I mean? To try to achieve whatever it is that we want to do to achieve, or to have a good relationship with a partner or a friend, even in friends and whatnot. Relationships with friends and whatnot can be very strained if people don't have good social skills. So quite often people, if they are having these problems and these issues, they just keep to themselves. They won't even develop any solid friendships. They won't go out and try to accomplish they won't set goals. They won't set goals and have dreams and whatnot. They've just never learned to, how to do that, right? So they may not be able to demonstrate impaired social cognition, which is one's awareness of oneself in relation to others and an awareness of others' emotions. Impaired social cognition may lead a person to view many social interactions as stressful. And that I've seen a lot with people, and whether or not they were neglected as children, I don't know. But I'm just, you just see a lot of people who just have problems going, even going to any kind of social function, being around people. You can imagine that there's some problems when people just shut down and they just want to spend all their time on their own by themselves. And some people are just loners like that. Maybe we're not neglected as children, but it's just that it can kind of lead to that, right? So they talk about neglected and emotional, psychosocial, and behavioral problems. Neglected children, even when older, may display a variety of emotional, psychosocial, and behavioral problems, which may vary depending on the age of the child. And some of these include, and they list them off here, and there's a whole bunch, and we'll go right through them. Displaying an inability to control emotions or impulses, usually characterized by frequent outbursts. Being quiet and submissive is another one. Having difficulty learning in school and getting along with siblings or classmates, experiencing unusual eating or sleeping behaviors, attempting to provoke fights or solicit sexual interactions, acting socially or emotionally inappropriate for their age, being unresponsive to action, displaying apathy, being less flexible, persistent, and enthusiastic than non-neglected children, and demonstrating helplessness under stress. They just don't know what to do, this helpless, right? Having fewer interactions with peers than non-neglected children, displaying poor coping skills, acting highly dependent, acting lethargic and lackluster, displaying self-abusive behavior, suicide attempts, or cutting themselves, exhibiting panic or dissociative disorders, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or post-traumatic stress disorder, suffering from depression, anxiety, or low self-esteem is another one. It's just, a given, right? Children who have been neglected and grown up neglected, probably do exhibit some, lack of self-esteem anxiety problems and depression and, possibly self-destructive behavior, self-abuse behavior. It's just horrible. Exhibiting juvenile delinquent behavior or engaging in adult criminal activities, engaging in sexual activities leading to teen pregnancy or fatherhood, and having low academic achievement, abusing alcohol or drugs. So this is just some of the things that, can happen to children and what kind of behavioral consequences that come from that. Societal consequences. It says society pays for many of the consequences of neglect. There are large monetary costs for maintaining child welfare systems, judicial systems, law enforcement, special education programs, and physical and mental health systems that are needed to respond to and to treat victims of child neglect and their families. That's all secondary prevention and tertiary prevention, right? After the abuse or after the neglect's already happened, then you have to have all these people and all these different programs in place because of it, right? And I saw not too long ago, I saw a website that had a reference to a dollar amount of what it costs just the United States every year, child abuse and neglect. And child abuse and neglect costs $104 billion annually. Because that's what it costs the United States, because it exists. Because there is child abuse and neglect. It costs the United States alone, and this was just a figure that I saw just recently on a website, $104 billion a year. So what I say we should do, and I talked about this on a few shows last week and the week before, was that we should take that, multiply it by even 5, and take $500 billion and stop child abuse and neglect, once and for all, right? It doesn't make any sense to keep pumping all this money into this stuff if we're not going to try to stop this mess. Primary prevention is the way to go, and that's what Dreamcatchers for Abused Children is all about. And I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. What it's all about is education, awareness, and prevention, right? Stopping the abuse before it even happens. And that's the big thing. It's like getting to these parents, getting to these children before it happens. That's what we want to do. We don't want to see any more children being abused and neglected. We don't want children to have to go through this system after they've already been abused and been neglected, right? We want to stop this before it happens. No child deserves to suffer this way, and no child deserves to be neglected. No child deserves to be abused in any way. And so, we have to, as a society, decide what's important to us. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be abused. But, of course, nobody wants to talk about it. Let's just shove it under the carpet and keep on trucking on, and then, pretty soon what's it going to be, 1 in 2 girls and then 1 in 3 boys? I mean, come on, we got to do something about this, and we can't keep pushing it off for each generation. Oh, well, let the next generation handle it. That's why I'm so glad I got off the couch, 3.5 years ago, I saw some stuff on TV that I just didn't like, and it was about, abuse in Afghanistan. The women are... It was just a show that they actually snuck out, on hidden camera, and brought out this footage from, Afghanistan, the way these women were being treated. And I was sitting on the couch and I thought, why am I not getting involved? I sit here and I'm so, thankful that there are people who are working so hard to change things for the better for children and for women and for all human rights abuses, right? I'm standing up against abuse, period. I don't care, any kind of abuse, right? And so, I thought, why am I not getting involved? I'm just leaving it up to everybody else. I mean, I have a voice. I got 2 legs. I got fingers. I can type. I can talk. I should be able to get involved and say that I don't like what I see. I don't like what's going on in this world today. And so, if I don't like it, then sitting around and complaining about it is not going to change anything. And we actually, have to do this now, because it's a sorry, sad excuse to just push it off for the next generation. Oh, let somebody else deal with it. That's just pathetic. That's what we can say about this last generation who hasn't done anything about it, right? Now we got to do it, right? And if we don't do it, we're going to look just as bad as this last generation who hasn't been doing much. So a lot of people are busting their butts and give their whole entire lives to try to stop child abuse. And I know there's millions of people around the world actually working on this right now. But the thing is we need everyone's voice, and we need everyone to look around at the children in their own lives and stop the abuse and make sure it doesn't happen, right? That's the whole thing. So, it's just huge. So what it costs, the societal consequences, it says many indirect societal consequences also exist, such as increased juvenile delinquency, adult criminal activity, mental illness, substance abuse, and domestic violence. There may be a loss of productivity due to unemployment and underemployment associated with neglect. Additionally, supporting children who have developmental delays because of malnutrition often is much more costly than providing adequate nutrition and care to poor women and children. And plus, these kids don't deserve to be suffering with malnutrition, especially in North America. I mean, we see this stuff going on around the world where they don't have any food and there's food shortage. And I mean, even if there was food, the government wouldn't allow it to get out to the public anyway, to the people, right? They're just keeping it stored up, and it's just sitting there in storehouses waiting to be, I don't know what they're going to do with it, trade it for arms or something, I don't know. But anyway, the whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. There's food for everybody on this planet, but whether or not people are getting it, that's another story. But we see people in other countries suffering from this, and that's sad enough. But people in our own countries, North America and Canada, like this is like United States, all North America, even Mexico, there's no excuse. It's ridiculous what's going on here. When I hear child abuse and neglect and stuff going on here, it makes me mad because there's millions and billions of dollars being pumped into this. There's millions of people working in this field to try to stop this and to try to help children. And yet we see all the headlines rolling in every day, the same old thing, children being killed and abused at the hands of their parents and caregivers mainly, and then some strangers and child sexual predators, right? So it's so important that we do get involved and stop this, right? And the only way to do it is start talking. Because nobody wants to talk about abuse. You know why? Because it's Aunt Jane and Uncle Joe who abused their child. And they don't want to get, if Aunt Jane and Uncle Joe go to jail, who's going to be able to provide the steaks for the barbecue? You know what I mean? It all comes down to this family, this dependency family BS, which keeps families in this cycle of abuse all the time, right? Which is just horrible. And, who cares if Aunt Joe and Aunt Jane go to jail because they abuse their children? They need to go to jail because they abuse their children. And they need to get some help, and those children need help, right? This is ridiculous to keep these family ties going when we know that there's abuse going on, and people will bury their heads in the sand and allow it to happen, and quite often encourage it a lot of times. So this has got to change, right? And it's going to be up to you, it's going to be up to me, we have to do it. So behavioral consequences. Neglected children may suffer from particular behavioral problems throughout life, and research shows that children who are exposed to poor family management practices are at greater risk of developing conduct disorders and participating in delinquent behavior. It says neglected children also may be at risk for repeating the neglectful behavior with their own children, and that's the same with abuse. They don't always, not every child who was abused will go on to abuse their own children. That's a fact. Some do, some don't, right? But it's just that it does open up the door for that whole cycle, the generational cycle of abuse, right? That's what we need to stop. Research also shows that neglected children do not necessarily perceive their upbringing to be abnormal or dysfunctional and may model their own parenting behavior on the behavior of their parents. And that's because they don't know anything different. And they think, oh, well, that's the way I was raised. That's fine. I'll just raise my children this way. I was fine. I was happy. Not realizing that they were neglected or they were abused. That can happen, especially when children grow up from day one in a home with a lot of abuse. And that's where I come from. One study estimates that approximately 1/3 of neglected children will maltreat their own children. So that's pretty sad. Early prevention and intervention is the next section here. And they said that the incidence of neglect and the harm it does to children can be reduced or mitigated through early prevention and intervention programs. It says although the effectiveness of these programs has not been studied adequately, they are most effective when they are comprehensive and long-term. Of course, right? The long term, because just to make sure that things are going the way they should be with that family and that the children are not being neglected, right? It shouldn't be just some short term, 2-week thing. Okay, the parents are doing good for 2 weeks. So the caregivers, I guess we're good to go. The kid will be fine, or the children will be fine. That's not the case. It says with the effects of neglect being especially damaging during infancy, it is also important to work with families as early as possible, even before the baby is born. So 2 promising early prevention and intervention programs are the OLDS model and Project STEEP, Steps Towards Effective, Enjoyable Parenting. That's what they listed here. The OLDS model utilizes intensive nurse home visiting during pregnancy and through age 2 of the child, and the program had positive effects on parenting attitudes and behavior and on reports of child maltreatment. Project STEEP includes home visitation and group support and education for expectant mothers and seeks to enhance mother-infant relationships. In the initial implementation of this program, mothers in the experimental group demonstrated a better understanding of child development, better life management skills, fewer depressive symptoms, fewer repeat pregnancies within 2 years of the birth of their baby, and greater sensitivity to their child's cues and signals. So there's programs out there that are working, and there's programs that will work. It's a matter of funding. It's a matter of whether or not they're nationwide and how available they are to people, right? That's the whole issue. It's quite often, they're just not, they're in one state, but they're not in another, or, they're in one county, they're not in another county. So one set of people will have these programs available to them, one set of parents, and the other set in another county next door won't have any access to this at all. And so that's why it has to go nationwide. And, that's what Dreamcatchers for Abused Children is all about, and that's what we hope to do in the future. Is we have a lot of programs that we're going to be rolling out that will help families, help children, relationships, and summer day camps for children, just all kinds of stuff. We have all kinds of stuff, projects and whatnot that have been already written up, and we're just waiting for funding. So once that happens, we'll hopefully go nationwide, and that's what I hope to see. So, thanks everybody for tuning in and for being here. The next section of this PDF is Risk and Protective Factors. That's Chapter 4. And you can go to this again. I'll give you the website again, www.childwelfare.gov/pubs, P-U-B-S, /user manuals, /neglect.pdf. And you can check this out. They said here, neglect occurs to children of all races, socioeconomic classes, religions, family structures, and communities. So, it doesn't just affect people who are living on a low income. It can affect anyone, right? Doesn't matter what kind of religion you are, doesn't matter what kind of family structure it is, what type of community it is. Neglect can happen to any child. Any parent can be neglectful, and any child can be neglected, right? That's the same with child abuse. It's the same exact thing. And anyone can be an abuser, right? Men, women, doesn't matter. Age just doesn't matter about the age. Abuse is a choice, right? Parents choose to abuse. Caregivers choose to abuse the adults or the children. Even children can be abusers, and they choose to do what they're going to do. They choose to abuse. It's a choice, right? They don't have to. They don't have to hurt their children. They don't have to neglect their children, and they can get help, but they choose to just do what they do, and for many reasons. A lot of psychological, mental issues probably, and could be some substance abuse, could be some anger management problems, could be that they grew up abused and they're just passing on the cycle. There's so many factors involved there, but that's what we do, that's what we study, and that's what we're trying to get out to people, is the fact that it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter how much money you have. Children are being abused in every section, cross-section of society, right, and neglected. So this is the thing, it's not necessarily somebody who's living under the poverty level, right? Children in wealthy families can be neglected too. It doesn't have anything to do with money. You know what I mean? It doesn't have anything to do with that. So this is the thing. It's so important to take a look around at the children in your own life and make sure that they're not being neglected and not being abused, right? And check out our website, Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, at http://dreamcatchersforabusedchildren.com. And there's headlines rolling up every day. Sandra posts those for every day, gathers and collects the information from the other websites that are out there posting. And so you can see, comprehensively, like, what is happening, and she gets as many as she possibly can on there every day, and that's a lot of work, and so I thank her very much for doing that. And you can check out our website, and there's all kinds of good information on there for parents who are, if you're struggling and you're just having a hard time, there's references, there's resources and links, and if we can help you with information, get a hold of us. Any volunteer for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children will try to get you some help, if we possibly can, if there's some way that we can help with information or references or resources, or just pointing you in the right direction or whatever, we'll find somebody who can get you the answers that you need, right? So get a hold of us, and have a great night, everybody. I'll be back on tomorrow morning, one child abuse survivor to another. We're going to continue talking about the critical inner voice, toxic shame, and whatnot. And have a great night, and we'll be talking to you real soon. Thanks for tuning in, and take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.